afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to this panel about the business case for collaboration. I have the pleasure of being joined today by three executives who are going to be able to give you the most detail and perhaps a few lessons to take home with you in terms of how to collaborate and get the most for your business. First, I would like to ask Mike Sutcliffe, the CEO for Accenture Digital, to join me on stage. We are also joined by Thaddeus Arroyo, the AT&T Business CEO today. Welcome. And finally, Bob Wheeler, if you'd please join us on stage. He is the CEO of Airstream. Please have a seat, gentlemen. So for those of you who don't know Airstream, it's an RV, or as Bob puts it more elegantly than me, a home on wheels company. And actually, maybe that's probably a good place to start to talk about collaboration. AT&T and Airstream have a collaboration underway together, which has been going on, I think, for about a year or so. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing together and why it makes sense for your business? And maybe, Bob, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to start. Thanks for having me today. So if you think about what Airstream does, you mentioned a home on wheels. So as our customers started becoming more connected in their smart homes, they expected that same kind of connectivity in their home on wheels, their Airstream. So smarter, more intuitive features, but enabled by connectivity. We had a choice of making these features controllable locally with Bluetooth or getting cloud connected and using services such as AT&T provides to give good connectivity remotely and anywhere you want to go. The interesting part for us is that as we move past the simple thinking of kind of smart home IoT technology, it's opened up a whole new business, range of business opportunities for Airstream. And we're a pretty old-fashioned company, but now we're thinking about digitally connected services around travel and trip planning, navigation, supply, connecting with the Airstream community. So it's a long answer, but it's really changed our business perspective about what we can do as a business in the future.
Thaddeus, what does AT&T do exactly as part of that partnership?
Sure, let me talk about this, because I think when you look at the innovation that we want to drive to the marketplace as we connect objects in addition to connecting people, particularly for businesses, what we look at is where is the opportunity for us to go and impact experiences in new ways and ultimately allow businesses to extend their reach into their customers and maybe even transform those experiences. And so I think as you look at our collaboration with Airstream, this was an extension of what we've been doing for years with the automotive industry, now even the trucking industry. Today, we support globally 31 brands. Now we have 32 with Airstream, even though there's not an engine in front of it unless something's pulling it. Now we have an opportunity to reconnect them in a new way. I think we're moving into an era where everybody and everything is connected. And if you look at what we're doing around creating a platform to extend those capabilities, is how you bring those together and create conversations with objects that help elevate and create these new experiences that are going to measure if you think about this, the willingness to select a product. And I think this is the great example to start with, because when you look at now the connected recreational vehicle, you've now elevated that, you've made it more environmentally efficient, but you've created an ability now to extend its use beyond potentially just a weekend, because now you can support your traditional needs in an extended fashion, but you can also control aspects of that allow you to have the vehicle cool before you even get back to it. And so what we're oriented around is connecting everything on this planet that ultimately can improve and enhance an experience, can drive a more efficient sustainability model for every industry. And we're doing this across multiple verticals where, beyond automotive, that's obviously a big driver. But we've gone from connecting 1 million net new things, and I'm not talking people, to our network each quarter. If you look at the last 6 months, to connecting 1 million net new things every month. That's how ideation is being spawning and the innovation that we see coming from this connected ecosystem. And that's what's so exciting, is to collaborate with orthogonal players and find new use cases. Because as we find one here, we can apply it to healthcare. We can apply this now beyond all of the traditional sets And we're already doing this in cities. And so I don't think there's an end to the benefits. And it really, as we begin talking about this next generation, we think this will only go to the next level as we move into a world where we have no inability to connect virtually every object on the planet. This is just the beginning with the travel trailer.
We'll come back a little bit later to kind of
Sure.
the different objects we're connecting
Yep.
and the business cases behind them.
Okay.
But to me, the key question is, so, sure, we're connecting everything, but what's that mean for business and how is it affecting business? So in your case, Bob, you mentioned how, you mentioned to me how it's helped you gather data and come up with new products. Could you talk a bit about that and how, connecting the RVs has affected your business?
Well, sure. We've had a great connection with our customers historically, but a lot of it's been anecdotal and through customer surveys and focus groups. Now, as we start to roll out more and more smart connected Airstreams into the marketplace, we're starting to get fantastic data, telemetrics, understanding how people use their systems, which how they cool, how they heat, tank levels, resource use, electricity, LP, water. As we understand these use cases, we can fine-tune our offerings to make the products better and more relevant. And then, as I mentioned, we start to think about all the other things we can do to affect that customer experience. How can we make travel safer? How can we make it more enjoyable, less hassles? How can we connect Airstreamers with other Airstreamers? They're kind of like a flock. They like to flock together. So the opportunities here are really limited by our imagination. And frankly, AT&T's helped spark some thinking about some things we might pursue in the future.
And I think what's important here as you look at this, and I think in the early days of wireless, we looked at making businesses. So back to your question very specifically on businesses, making them more productive. But I think this goes beyond that, and this is about making businesses more competitive. And if you look at this, it's not just responding to disruption and copying what the next guy has done. This is now about creating your own disruption. If you look at what Airstream has done in this one use case, they have the first in the industry to do this. This is creating new disruption. It's also the ability to not just respond or create disruption, but to create new business models. I think every product is a service waiting to be happen when you connect it. So it changes what your product is. It obviously makes you more competitive. It allows you to move between industries. The nature of competition between industries is more porous than ever before. And this is an element in ultimately competing in that space.
Mike, you have a good bird's eye view on the market. What's the broader trend you see behind such collaboration and behind the rationale that's behind connecting things?
It's interesting. The story is familiar because what Airstream talks about is their customer experience, and that's the lens that we see people looking at the world through. And as they consider the experiences, they ask, how are people using the product, and can we redesign that next generation of the product to be more efficient and more effective for that specific customer? But also, what are the edges of the product experience? When do they stop using it, and why? Can we extend how they're using the product? And then that takes us into some ecosystem questions of, well, if I don't have the capital investment, or I don't have the infrastructure, or I don't have the talent in the workforce, but I want to be able to provide more maintenance to people who are in transit with those vehicles, or I want to provide a community where they can get together and be around a specific event. Your company's probably not going to be the one providing that specific piece of the experience, but through the ecosystem, you can manage it.
Right.
And then you can act as that control point that creates a better and more extensive experience for those customers. So that's what we see. We see people looking at the ecosystem and saying, we understand the customer's intentions, we understand their preferences, we understand their behaviors, and as we get more personalized in our responses to those things, we need to bring others into our ecosystem to help extend our reach and our effectiveness in creating the next experience that would be valuable to that customer.
And so what industries or verticals do you see today as the most advanced in terms of connecting, going digital, and reaching out to partners to do that?
Well, it's interesting because it literally is happening across all industries. We often get the question, is it the retail customer-facing industries that are happening? And of course, yes, they're early adopters, and we see it across anybody that's creating an experience for somebody who's in the middle of a shopping transaction, regardless of whether they're buying a vehicle or clothing or. But it's also equally effective for somebody going to a sporting event and wanting to have a better experience at a cultural event or a sporting event. And then we're seeing just as much interest in the business-to-business space, where people are thinking about how business transacts with each other and how they trade information and how goods and products are moved through the value chain. And so it really isn't just a single industry or a single use case. It is pervasive across the entire ecosystem.
And I think an interesting part of that, the reason why if you look across each of these verticals, as you connect it, any object in the specific vertical, the digital exhaust that creates not only empowers the experience that you targeted to create, but it creates the opportunity to create new ones. And I think a simple example of this, the data that is created out of a recreational vehicle can also be used to predict, rather than just respond to a failure, but predict, because you see signatures emerge. And so whether you look at healthcare or whether you look at manufacturing, whether you look at automotive, it's ultimately now not just the sensing application that you're deploying and the experience that you're making richer, it's the creation now of these new potential models because of the richness of the digital exhaust that comes from that.
And what verticals do you think stand to benefit the most? You mentioned automotive. Seems like
Right.
connected cars are kind of the natural, it's a natural thing for cars to get connected. What verticals do you think have the most potential business-wise?
It's interesting. I'll give you 3 examples that are in 3 completely different industries, but you'll see through the examples that they impact both the customer and the experience the customer's having, as well as the operational efficiency. So here in Spain, Metro Madrid, right, which is moving 300,000 people at any point in time, just reduced their carbon emissions by 1,800 tons by controlling the ventilation in the system so that it's matched with where the trains and the people are at any point in time. So the people are getting better ventilation and better personal experience while they're on the trains, and the trains are more cost efficient, and the ventilation systems are reducing carbon emissions. So it comes through connectivity, right? I can monitor where the trains are, whether the systems are open or closed. I can look at air quality all in real time, and I can optimize doing that. Then we shift gears and we look at a company like Airbus, where they're actually using the connected goggles in the production process for final assembly of the aircraft. That's allowing the workers to do a better, faster job in the assembly process, much more efficient, by bringing that augmented reality of information into the environment, again, enabled by a 5G connection to a connected worker. And then we take, in India, where we did an experiment with patients in a heart care environment where they don't like staying overnight in the hospital for 3 nights just to be monitored. So if I could put a little bandage on them and send them home and do the monitoring in a home health environment, it's cheaper for the hospital and it's better for the patient, and they have a better experience through the entire care system. And so when we ask about where's the opportunity, there isn't an industry we can think of that doesn't have a massive opportunity. So it's not just connected cars, it's not just a retail experience, it's across the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think a couple of examples that come to mind to me that maybe to put a little more texture on, I think if you look at manufacturing, I think manufacturing will be massively disrupted, as we wirelessly enable and add millions, literally millions of sensors. Manufacturing has been connected for many years in the physical world, but now as we deploy the next generation of wireless and we can extend those capabilities without the need for the physical infrastructure anymore, the next greatest sensor out there becomes the video camera and video analytics that becomes the driver of a manufacturing process and the ability to interpret along the way. So manufacturing, I think, will have a substantial impact, as you decouple it from the physical world and you allow wireless and sensors and connectors to be deployed anywhere in a very flexible environment. I think, on retail, in retail, it'll empower the next generation of experiences. Today, we're doing it already for supporting, obviously, the guest experience across multiple retail, even quick serve restaurants for Wi-Fi guest experience at a site, and driving digital signage as we take those elements and put it together. But tomorrow, it's how we create the endless aisle, the ability now to go experience a brand but never have an inventory issue because you're digitally extending their ability to fulfill anywhere. And then in the very near future, as we bring now augmented reality and virtual reality to bear, it's to provide an avatar support for that experience in the retail store that has those capabilities and interacts directly with you. That is not that far away. Those are the types of experiences that come to life. And then healthcare, I think, just some incremental examples, because I think we're just at the beginning of this, but we're working in Chicago with Rush Hospital, and we announced one of our first 5G hospitals. And what we'll be bringing to life in that environment is essentially wirelessly extending what was physically connected in the past delivering entertainment experiences using this, improving patient outcomes using virtual reality, augmented reality for pain therapies in lieu of other mechanisms. But more importantly now is creating and improving these patient outcomes with the fact that you can connect all the experiences around them. And I think that's exciting when you see the innovation, and that's only what we know about today, because that innovation will breed more innovation.
Interesting. Bob, what's next for you? I mean, you've connected the RVs. How do you take this forward, and what's the next step in terms of connectivity?
Well, there's a couple of things. I talked about customer experience, but this sparked a thought on manufacturing. Airstreams are built by hand, not by machines. I saw a great augmented reality demo today. It'll have almost immediate application as soon as the tech gets tweaked a little bit in training new workers, training service personnel, helping onboard employees. We're a very manually driven business, and those kind of things are really impactful in terms of how quickly we can increase our production capacity. On the customer experience side, we're looking at that ecosystem around the travel trailer, the travel experience. Who can we partner with for trip planning, for booking of attractions? Who can we partner with to help supply your recreational vehicle, both as you're planning a trip, but also since we know where you're going, where you're going to be staying, we know your resource levels, we can predict that 2 days from now you're going to run out of LP gas, and we know where you're going to be, so we can have LP delivered to that campsite in 2 days. And that's the kind of customer experience that really we're seeking in the future and is enabled by these kind of technologies. So for us, we're at a phase right now where we're just starting to lay out the scope of our future business. And we're going to continue to manufacture and distribute recreational vehicles, of course, that's our core. But the business opportunity is around this whole digitally connected platform that's enabled by connectivity. We see that as a bigger opportunity for growth over the next 10 to 15 years, frankly, than recreational vehicle sales, which are on a nice but fairly flat trajectory. So we're just scratching the surface and figuring out how we embrace this as a business.
I'm curious, have you seen a shift in the types of consumers that you're getting for the RVs?
Yeah, we really have. Generally younger, as we provide more connected products and redesign the products for today's use cases. But I had a great thought today. It was sparked by something I saw in the AT&T booth. We see an opportunity for our aging customers who give up recreational vehicle travel because they get afraid for their health conditions. They have COPD or diabetes or blood pressure issues, and they're afraid to travel to leave their healthcare provider. With some simple connectivity for biometrics data, we can give them the confidence to continue to travel, keep in touch with your healthcare provider via telemedicine and uploading of this simple data, and give them the confidence to keep going. It might extend their recreational vehicle lifespan and benefit them and Airstream as well.
You keep the teenagers connected as well. That helps a lot of vacations.
Absolutely.
Thaddeus, I want to come back to you,
sure.
And maybe to Mike as well, whoever feels comfortable jumping in on this. We talk a lot about 5G and IoT in terms of consumer play. So, as consumers, we all want to know, what am I going to be able to do with my 5G phone, and what's going to be connected next among the multiple objects I have in my house? What's the potential for the B2B play there? And are we going to see a B2B play on 5G and IoT before we do on the consumer side?
Sure, I'm happy to start, and Mike can really give you much better information because he sees this from a very broad perspective. But I'll tell you what we're doing, because we've actually already launched our 5G in the United States, our 5G enterprise services, and it's around a couple of simple pillars. One is mobile 5G, a set of fixed capabilities such that we can support extended use cases that fit certain profiles of businesses, and then something new around this that's really multi-access edge compute. And when all these come together in 5G, and we're deploying these, at least in pilot phase today, across multiple businesses, we have examples in every vertical that I've just mentioned to you. So starting with manufacturing, we have a smart factory going in Austin, Texas with Samsung, where we're using video sensors and other sensors that are connected via 5G, and robots that are using 5G connectivity versus traditional. Let's think of that as Wi-Fi. Because of the characteristics of 5G, the low latency, the better performance, you can now rely on those along with human interaction because of obviously the latency that we can deliver through this process. Put it in simple context, from the point you hit the enter key to the point you get a response, these are speeds that process at the speed of the human brain in terms of interpreting an image. And then you get to speeds of that latency, you start opening up new applications, and I'll give you a couple, I think, in healthcare that'll be very relevant. So the smart factory, those are underway today. We have another one underway that's not public, but it's with a large manufacturer, and they're using a video and analyzing video images to keep track of very tight tolerances in their manufacturing process and stopping the line or ultimately making modifications based on that. 5G connectivity to the device so they can put them anywhere. And the other element of it that brings in is the third pillar of our strategy is this multi-access edge compute. The other thing you need to do is to take and process that information very rapidly. You have a fast network that gets it to the local compute, and we at the network plane are already separating that traffic, processing it locally, making decisions in real time. Those are real applications that are emerging. In healthcare, I mentioned what we're doing in the smart hospital. We're building applications around that include every aspect that I just mentioned, and that is the mobile extension of equipment that historically was physically wired to a station in a pod can now be centrally monitored. But now we're moving and extending beyond that with the extension now of compute on the premise, the ability now with what we're deploying in 5G to easily separate the traffic and send it to local compute versus what goes back to central, means that you can now start processing and managing these in near real time. And that's an enabler for medical robots, remote medical robots to be used during surgery. Can't have latency. So the nature of everything I've just described makes that possible, and will make that possible as this gets deployed widely across large geographies. And so that's an exciting element. The other element then is looking at 5G and using that to empower the next generation of mixed and augmented reality. What Bob saw today was a collaboration that we have underway with Magic Leap. They call it spatial computing because it's really the next generation beyond that. For anyone who wants to come visit our booth, be happy to show you and do a demo of that. But it's the next generation of spatial computing that now brings the physical world in with you. But to power this and to drive this compute, we don't want somebody walking around with a computer, so we use 5G technology to deliver that from the cloud. And so those are the types of experiences that become real. They become real in 5G. They become real now because we can build these on the physical premise today, put the in-building system in place, put the local compute. Everything I've just described can be put in place today and actually driven to scale, while the 5G networks are deployed on a much more wider geographic basis.
So that means for carriers, the initial revenues from 5G are going to be coming from the business side, definitely.
For us, they certainly are. And if you look at our initial implementations have largely been built around that, including where we've deployed 5G, mobile 5G into the zones. We're working with small businesses who can benefit from those. We're learning now, we're using one hotspot as the public device we have for standard-based mobile 5G, but we have 2 more devices coming out later this year. Gives us a chance to use real experiences to evolve our approach to that market.
Yeah, it's not surprising. We see the first generation of demand coming from a business-to-business or an enterprise side of the house. But we're also, we're looking at Magic Leap and other devices. There's a question of when the immersive experiences are going to really come to life. And so far, we've been waiting on the devices to be good enough in terms of battery and the quality of the visual image that you're seeing. But when that comes to life, we think the entertainment and the gaming side of the market just explodes, as well as connected workers and safety applications. We are seeing a lot of demand from connected mines, connected operations, smart plants. We have a plant turnaround capability we do in the oil and gas industry where you've got 5,000 guest workers coming in to do a turnaround, and they all need to know what's going on. They're tracking the tools, the transportation, all of the components that are in a turnaround. And this is today. This is all happening in real time. When we look at the future of production, where we want to have more configurable production so we can do shorter production runs closer to the market, that means the factories themselves have to be reconfigurable. And guess what? 5G is one of the underlying technologies that allows factories to start going that direction. So plenty of demand out there, literally dozens and dozens of use cases being done today, and we'll see dozens more coming online in the next couple of years.
So we have about 5 minutes before the panel is over, and I really want you guys to leave the executives and entrepreneurs in the room with some advice. So if each of you had a piece of advice in terms of conducting digital transformation, which can be all but natural for some industries, about connecting your factories, about going towards connected objects and IoT, but also about doing collaboration. And finding the right partner for collaboration. What would your advice be on those points? Bob, we can start with you.
I'll start. First, find partners that share your vision, and that goes beyond just technology. It comes back to culture and how they communicate. And again, we've had a great relationship that's really just begun with AT&T. But seek those partnerships. Look at the ecosystem around which services or products you provide, and find those partners in those space that can bring fresh thinking, innovation, but also has a good overlay with your culture, such that those kind of relationships will get off and continue on the right foot with companies that are aligned on more than just a technology basis.
I think something, and something Bob told me that I'm going to use now, and that is being inspired by a best-in-class experience, and that's what drove the journey that ultimately brought them to us to connect the recreational vehicle. I've always said make sure we compare yourself to aspirational experiences, because if you look at when you're working on digital innovation, in the past we've had a tendency, and I'm a former chief information officer, to compare ourselves to how we did it before and how other competitors in our industry do it. And I think that's a mistake. I think we have to compare ourselves to the best in breed digital experience that you've ever consumed. I think that's a critical element, because that's how you're going to be measured. Your employees who use the technology that you give them will use that. Your customers are going to compare you to the best in class experience they've ever had digitally engaging with any product or service, not with just being better than what you've done before. And I think a final element, because I think is so important, and it's how, it's a question I always ask the team, and it's not taking a linear approach. And a linear approach would say, how do I make what I'm doing today a little better if I can wirelessly connect it, if I can do something different? I like to begin with the concept of how do you want it to work? Because I think if you envision something and how you want it to work, whether it's a customer experience, whether it's how your teams are going to collaborate, the reality is with the technologies available today and with the technologies that are coming, you can. So if we begin with that, we move to a transformational innovation, not a linear one.
And I agree with Thaddeus. I mean, the extension that we see on that is that, we talk about drawing a line between what you could do and what you should do. Where do you want to spend your energy? And what we see in the world of digital is we see this combinatorial effect of technology and data and analytics and artificial intelligence all coming together. And what happens is every once in a while, we see that there was a problem that was too hard to solve yesterday, which actually becomes solvable. And so in your businesses, in the industries that you're part of, there are these long known problems, the friction points in the industry. And the question is 5G one of these trigger point technologies that moves a problem from the too hard pile, just too hard to solve, into the pile it's solvable? And if I solve it first, will I gain and be able to defend a significant competitive advantage in the industry? And we think 5G is one of those trigger point technologies that starts to move those problems from the too hard bucket into it's possible. And that helps you to rethink, where should I draw the line between what I could do, which is maybe incremental improvements on the existing operating model, to what I should do, which is go reset the industry and define what good looks like tomorrow.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, the three of you, for a very, very helpful insight. I hope the room got some of it as well. And we'll leave you all to go and think of the best digital experience you've ever had for inspiration, nothing less. Thank you for attending, and I'll leave the room for the next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.